and it is week 2. And kind of go over what we're going to do this week. So I am really good about getting grades back to you. I really like to get them back to you as soon as possible. So generally you won't wait very long, because I know you've got other things that need to do, especially if I ask you to resubmit or continue on with the project. Basically, if you don't hear from me, just go ahead and continue on with the project. We're going to be completing steps 1 through step 5, right? And again, submit milestone for review, and we're going to be mostly working on your IT business requirements. So if we go back to our projects page, right? So I've graded step 1, step 2, step 3 for you, and kind of given you my thoughts on this one. And then we're going to go back and take a look at where we go for the IT business requirements. So this is probably one of the most interesting parts of what we do here. So in the last one, we took a look at business requirements. We did take a look at what you've got, functional requirements, the things that it needs to do. And this is really what you're building. And because this is what you're building, this is where all your cost and this is where all your support and your technology and everybody else comes in terms of what you need to be able to do for this project, right? So these are the things that it actually does, right? Any kind of reporting, legal requirements, authorization, authentication, right? So authorization, are you going to use MFA? All these things help determine how you're going to burn money on operations, how you're going to burn money on supporting systems, and all the other things that are going to go along with this. You may also want to do some workflow with this. Depends on how you want to define workflow. There are some things, especially if it's a legal or regulatory requirement, where you want to have a very specific workflow, and these are things that you need your employees or your people to do. Other things can be a little bit, more relaxed in terms of helping people solve problems with your product. Those can be a little bit more free-flowing in terms of workflow, right? Because you never know what the problem walking in the door is. You're going to have a playbook, but it may not have everything along the way. How you're going to do systems and evaluation and client and compliance. So again, all those things that go along with it. The non-functional requirements, though, and this is what's interesting, right? Non-functional, this is where the cloud computing performs best. Scalability, capability, capacity, availability, reliability, recoverability, all these things, all these non-functional, and this is your cloud computing environment right here. Right, and depending on how you build it, whether it's how elastic and how scalable you make it, you're going to spend most of your time here in non-functional, right? The functional stuff that you're going to be doing, business rules, transactions, authentication, authorization levels, all that stuff is baked into how you're going to support that with your non-functional. So if you're going to do scalability, how are you going to do authorization and accessibility through scalability, right? How are you going to make sure it's available to the right people at the right time doing the right thing? So all these things make some really interesting things that go along with it. So if you want to scale up to 1,000 total users in the system, well, what happens when you want to scale back down to 50, right? So you've got your elasticity and your pliability of the system as well to go along with it. 98% of turnaround, our reliability is usually going to be 5 nines in the cloud. So again, all those things you're going to want to take a look at from that viewpoint. And again, go ahead and take a look at your resources on this one, just because they do make things a little bit more interesting along the way, to kind of help you out in terms of how you're going to do part of the value chain for information technology and specifically for the cloud. So you definitely want to do that as part of it. So when you're defining your business requirements, you also need to take a look at the data storage and all the rest of it and how that's going to go. So your data storage, again, I think you're going to be using some intelligent tiering here. You're going to be using some aging rules when it comes to your data and how that data is going to work and how long that data is going to need to be accessible. There are specific rules around data retention and elections and balloting and all the rest of it. It has to be available for forensic analysis along the way as well, but there also has to be a paper copy. Right. So that also complicates things because there literally has to be a paper copy. Paper copies are usually held by the state board of elections, but the electronic records just need to be accessible, if I understand it correctly, from what I've been able to find out and read. So you're still going to have to keep all those things accessible. And if you're multinational or you're multi-state, then you have to be able to provide that accessibility, but keep it secure, depending on which jurisdiction you're working with. Right, so you may be working with a jurisdiction in LA County, but then you may be working with the Maricopa County in Arizona, and then you may be working with King County in Seattle, Washington. And you need to keep all three of those separate but equal, right? You don't want to mix King County ballots with Maricopa County ballots accidentally. So again, that's where this gets to be interesting in terms of data storage and data access from that whole process, and then your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So SWOT analysis is really kind of fun. It's an interesting way of taking a look at things as you go through this. So this is just one way of presenting data. It's not necessarily the only way. So if you have a better way of doing it, I'm willing to bend on this one. This isn't a big issue for me, but I want to make sure that we're covering where your threats are and where your weaknesses are, especially in this process, right? So as you kind of go through this, what are your strengths? What do you bring into the table? What are your weaknesses? What do you need to have? What are the opportunities? I mean, because this is going to be huge. If you're starting out here, this is huge. And what are your threats? This is even bigger because you're also proposing change. And change can be problematic along the way. People are going to want to make sure that you prove what you're doing and that you've got good accountability across the board for what you're trying to do and how the whole process works. So again, it's that whole analysis that you've got cooking that you definitely want to be able to take a look at and bring in and process along the way. So that basically gets you through step 5 on this, right? And make sure that you're articulating what you need to do, and that how can you use your strengths to take advantage of those opportunities, and then how can you use your advantagement, your advantageousness in terms of those opportunities to kind of address your weaknesses, right? Weaknesses, usually you can, if your weaknesses are things like skills, people with specific skills, you need someone that's already got some background in cloud computing, election. You can probably buy those. You can probably get a contractor. You can probably get someone along the way. It may be a little bit more money, but it's a budget item, right? If you decided that you wanted to use blockchain for your authentication string to make sure that one ballot counts one time and that the person who did the ballot is actually the person who cast it, well, you may not know about blockchain. You may not understand how that works or what the process is. So that's another contractor that you can buy. Or if you want to keep them on board, go ahead and hire for it. Right? There's nothing wrong that says you can't hire a full-time person to kind of be your key person on this, be the big advisor, be the person that helps implement it. Blockchain is pretty straightforward in terms of its implementation and process, but it does have some interesting ways that you can do some things with blockchain that you didn't expect. Right? Again, that's kind of that whole weakness process on that one. So that's kind of week 2. Again, it's not all that difficult. It's pretty straightforward. But definitely do pay attention to your business requirements, because I'm going to be really focusing on that. I'm going to be really taking a look at it from that viewpoint of what do we need to do and how do we need to do it and why do we need to do it in a specific way. And then your strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats. Those are going to be your 2 big things for this week that I'm going to be really paying attention to. You should get your papers back for steps 1 through 3 pretty quickly. Again, I believe in getting feedback to you timely. Definitely do read my comments all the way through. And again, if you have any questions, do reach out to me and we'll get you all covered. Thanks much. See you in the next lecture.